So in this component, as you can see, it's a functional component. So here it's already running. I'll just simply load the component or refresh the page. When I do refresh the page, you can see the user component is rendered. This log is being shown here. So this is the first thing that loads here. So after the once the component has rendered, this is the first log that we are seeing. Now let's add a use effect to this thing. So I'll just simply call a use effect here. And inside the use effect, I won't be adding any dependencies. I'll simply put one more console log called use effect without dependencies loaded. Now I'll just clear out the console log from here. I'll refresh the log once again. As you can see, first this gets rendered. So now once the component is rendered, then the call goes to the use effect. Or is it because I have added the log first here? So let's just clarify that out too. I'll do one thing. I'll just cut this use effect from here and I'll put it on top. Now if I refresh the page, I'll just reload once again. Now you can see that no matter how I put it, this is the first thing that gets printed. That's because like this happens when the component is rendered. Now once the component is rendered, then use effect comes into the picture and this gets printed. Okay, so now I have already added a button here. On clicking the button, I am modifying the state here. So I'll just click me to modify the state and see what all re-renders or not. So if I click this button here, you can see this gets re-rendered and this is also re-rendered. So these two things re-render on change of a state or a prop. Now let's try adding another use effect with a dependency. I'll add this thing with dependencies loaded. So inside I'll just add an empty array. That's it. I'll just save this thing and rerun the code. If I refresh, you can see this gets rendered first. Then comes use effect without dependency is loaded, and then this is also loaded. Now I'll just try changing the state variable from here. When I click on this thing, you can see it's re-rendered and this also gets rendered. So basically this gets printed along when the component is rendered, and this gets called on each re-render. But as you can see from here, this thing, use effect with dependency, this thing is loaded only once on the initial render. That's it, and it's not being called again on state change or re-render. Now let's add one more use effect with a dependency. With the dependency on, let's say, data. Okay. Now if I refresh this thing again, you can see each of the use effects are loaded along with the render log, right? Now if I click on state change here, you can see the user component is rendered. This thing gets called and this also gets called without dependency is loaded, and this also gets called. Okay, so that's how this thing is working. The only thing that's not being loaded is this one. This happens only on the initial render, only after the initial render, not on the initial render, but after the initial render, this gets called only once. Okay, now if you see, this thing gets executed on each render, right? So you might have a doubt, maybe we can do this also similar to like this only, right? Why do we need to use this particular use effect? Basically the difference being like this gets called only after the component is rendered, not on before that thing is rendered or something. Like this gets called when the component is rendering, right? This gets called when the component is actually rendering. Now once the component is rendered, if you want some actions to be done on that portion, like once rendering finished, once it re-renders, at that time you can use this thing. That's the sole purpose of this use effect without any dependencies here. So I hope you find this video useful. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.